Claire Dawson clutched her 6-month-old daughter Ella closer to her chest as she stared down at the coins in her palm for the third time. 473. The flickering lights of Thompson's drugstore cast a sterile glow over her drawn, pale face. In her basket sat the cheapest pack of diapers, the kind that leaked and gave Ella terrible rashes. They cost $7.99. She had stretched the last few diapers as far as possible, rinsing and reusing them, but there was nothing left now. The coins in her hand were the very last until payday, still 3 days away. "It's okay, sweetheart," she whispered as Ella fussed, her tiny hand curling around a loose strand of Claire's unwashed blonde hair. "We'll figure it out. We always do." At 23, Claire hadn't planned to be a single mother working 2 exhausting jobs just to keep the lights on. But plans didn't mean much after Matthew left, claiming he wasn't ready to be a father. When she was 7 months pregnant, her parents, overwhelmed with their own struggles, could only help occasionally, watching Ella when Claire's evening janitorial shift overlapped with her morning hours at the diner. Claire placed the diaper pack into her basket, then continued down the aisle, mentally checking prices. The baby formula was non-negotiable. She'd tried to breastfeed, but stress and sleepless nights had ended that months ago. Maybe she could return the single apple and small yogurt container she'd allowed herself. Food for her, a luxury. Ella came first, always. Behind her, unnoticed, stood a tall man in a charcoal gray suit. Nathaniel Reed, CEO of Reed & Whitmore Technologies, had stopped by the pharmacy on his way home from a board meeting to pick up heartburn medicine. His company had just secured a multi-million-dollar medical supply deal. Despite his success, something gnawed at him. At 42, Nathaniel had achieved nearly everything he'd set out to, yet he went home each night to an immaculate but empty penthouse. His dinners usually served for one. He watched the young woman ahead of him, frail, worn, clearly exhausted, placing items into her basket with the utmost care, then slowly returning most of them. She bounced the infant gently on her hip, murmuring quiet reassurances. Nathaniel felt something stir. There was a strength in her, a quiet resolve that tugged at something he hadn't felt in years. At the register, Claire set down her items, the diapers, the formula, and a tiny jar of mashed carrots. She held her breath. "That'll be $23.87. The teenage cashier announced, snapping gum between her teeth. Claire's heart sank. She had miscalculated, or maybe the prices had gone up again. I'm sorry. I'll need to put something back," she murmured, cheeks burning. She looked at Ella, who had begun to squirm. "The diapers," she said finally, pushing them aside. "Just the others, please." The cashier sighed, rescanned. 16, 12. Claire stared at the coins in her palm, still short. Tears threatened, but she blinked them away. She would not cry here. "I'm sorry. I can't." Her voice cracked as Ella whimpered softly, sensing her mother's distress. "Is there a problem?" came a deep voice from behind her. She turned, startled. The man's presence was commanding, his tailored suit, the sleek watch on his wrist, the scent of something crisp and expensive. His dark hair was streaked with dignified silver at the temples, and his sharp blue eyes flicked between Claire and the items on the counter. "No, I'm fine," she said quickly, years of hardship tightening her spine. "I just need to put some things back." Nathaniel looked at the small collection of baby supplies and then at the flushed face of the infant resting against her. "Please," he said, reaching for his wallet, "let me take care of it." "No." Claire's response was immediate. "Thank you, but we don't need charity." Nathaniel paused. There was pride in her voice, and it hit something deep. It reminded him of his own mother, a fiercely independent woman who had raised him alone after his father passed. He remembered how she used to refuse help, even when it nearly broke her. "It's not charity," he said softly. "Consider it a temporary loan if that helps." Claire hesitated, kneed Ward with pride. Ella whimpered again, and that soft sound made the decision for her. "I can pay you back," she whispered. "I get paid on Friday." Nathaniel nodded, though he had no intention of collecting anything. He handed his credit card to the cashier. "Add whatever else the baby needs, And something for yourself, too. Claire blinked. That's too much. I can't accept. You can, he interrupted gently. Someone once helped my mother when we had nothing. I'm just doing the same. The sincerity in his voice silenced her. Claire added a small pack of wipes and a tube of diaper rash cream to the counter. The cashier, now more alert, completed the transaction. As they stepped out into the cool evening air, Claire balancing the bag of baby supplies and Ella's weight on her hip, she turned toward the stranger. I'm Claire Dawson, she said, offering her free hand. And this is my daughter, Ella. Thank you for everything, Mr. Nathaniel Reed, he replied, shaking her hand, his gaze catching the roughness of her fingers, signs of hard work. Can I offer you a ride? Claire hesitated. It was a long walk home, over half an hour, and Ella was getting heavier by the minute. I live in Maple Hollow, she said, almost apologetically. I'm heading that way, Nathaniel lied easily. His luxury condo was actually on the opposite end of town. Please, it's really no trouble. They walked toward his car, a sleek black sedan that gleamed under the drugstore lights. As Nathaniel opened the passenger door for her, he found himself wondering more about this young woman with the tired eyes and iron will. Neither of them knew it yet, but that brief moment in the checkout line would be the spark that would change both their lives forever. As the car moved smoothly through the quiet streets, Claire sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her arms wrapped protectively around Ella, who had finally dozed off against her shoulder. Nathaniel kept his eyes on the road, giving her space, letting the silence settle. The soft hum of the engine filled the void, and Claire found herself stealing occasional glances at him. Everything about him, his clothes, his manner, even the way he handled the steering wheel, screamed wealth and refinement. Yet he hadn't looked down on her. Nathaniel noticed the glances but said nothing. He didn't want to spook her with small talk. Instead, he studied her reflection in the rearview mirror. She looked exhausted, her cheeks pale, her jaw clenched. But there was strength there too, an unmistakable resilience. This is it, Claire finally murmured, pointing to an old apartment building on the corner of Bellevue and Laurel. The paint was peeling, the porch light was broken, and rust streaked the metal bars on the windows. Nathaniel parked and stepped out, walking around to help her with the bags. Let me carry those. Claire hesitated. She never let strange men walk her to her door, especially not ones in $1,000 suits. But between juggling Ella and the groceries up 3 flights of narrow stairs, her body screamed for a break, and Nathaniel didn't push. He just waited quietly, holding the bags, his posture relaxed and open. She nodded once. All right, thank you. The inside of the building smelled faintly of old fried food and damp carpet. 1 flight up, a baby cried behind one of the doors. On the 2nd floor, a couple argued behind thin walls. Claire kept her eyes down, praying. Nathaniel wouldn't say anything. When they reached 3C, she fumbled with her keys. May I? He asked, holding out his hand gently. Claire handed him the keys, and he opened the door with ease. Inside, he stepped into a small but spotless space. The kitchen was just a counter, a 2-burner hot plate, and a mini fridge. A futon doubled. As a bed in the corner, made neatly, a small portable crib sat under the only window, decorated with a mobile of cut-out paper stars. On the windowsill, a chipped vase held fresh wildflowers, and a hand-painted sign read, Home Sweet Home. Nathaniel placed the bags on the counter, then looked around without judgment. Claire, noticing his silent survey, flushed. It's not much, she said defensively, brushing hair behind her ear. He turned to her, voice steady. It's a home. That's what matters. She said nothing, unsure how to respond to that. It had been so long since someone had said something kind without pity. Behind it, Ella stirred. Claire walked over to the crib and laid her down gently, but the baby whimpered. She needs changing, she said, reaching into one of the bags for the new diapers. She turned, catching Nathaniel still standing just inside the door, not making a move to leave. Thank you again, she added. Really, I don't want to keep you. He gave a small nod. Of course. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek business card. "If you ever need anything—" "I won't," Claire interrupted instinctively, then softened. "But, thank you." Nathaniel smiled faintly, placed the card on the counter, and let himself out. When the door clicked shut behind him, Claire exhaled for the first time in minutes. She changed Ella, then warmed a bottle. Sitting on the edge of the futon, she held her daughter and fed her, while her eyes drifted to the business card. "Reed and Whitmore Technologies," she read aloud. "Nathaniel Reed, Chief Executive Officer." Her heart skipped. She'd heard the name before. It was one of the biggest tech companies in the city. Medical equipment, innovation labs, thousands of employees. She had even applied there once, for a receptionist job 6 months ago. She never heard back. She looked at Ella, now peacefully drinking. "You had no idea who that man was, did you?" she whispered with a tired smile. Down the hallway, someone slammed a door. The apartment rattled slightly, a reminder of just how fragile their life was. But tonight, Ella had new diapers, formula, wipes, a full belly. Claire didn't know what had just begun, but something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, the weight on her chest felt just a little lighter. The next morning, Claire dropped Ella off with her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, a kind elderly woman who watched children in the building for a fraction of what daycares charged. Claire had been lucky to find her. Ella reached out with a toothless grin, and Mrs. Jenkins cooed. "You look tired, honey." "Ella's teething," Claire explained with a weary smile. "We barely slept." In truth, Claire had stayed up well past midnight sewing more handmade cloth dolls, her side hustle that earned a few extra dollars here and there online. Each one took hours to make. She sold them for $15 apiece, barely worth the time, but every bit helped. She tightened her apron and headed to Sunnyside Cafe, where the morning rush was already building. She poured coffees, served pancakes, and smiled for tips, while her feet screamed and her lower back throbbed. But even as she moved through the motions, her thoughts kept drifting back to Nathaniel Reed. He'd felt different. Not just because he was rich and had helped her without strings, but because of the way he'd treated her, with dignity, with respect. He hadn't looked at her like a project or a burden. By noon, she had nearly $40 in tips tucked into her pocket, a good morning by diner standards. She washed her hands, grabbed her bag, and was just about to clock out for her second job cleaning office buildings when Greta, the head waitress, walked up with an odd look on her face. "There's someone here to see you," she said, tilting, her head toward the front entrance. Claire turned. Standing just inside the door was Nathaniel, looking entirely out of place in his crisp navy suit, expensive shoes, and calm presence. His eyes met hers, and he offered a small, tentative smile. Claire walked over quickly. "What are you doing here? How did you even find me?" "I asked around your neighborhood," he replied without apology. "Mrs. Jenkins mentioned you worked here." Claire frowned. "You went back to my building?" "I wanted to make sure you and Ella were okay," he said, then added, "And I have a proposition for you." She stiffened. That phrase, a proposition, she'd heard it before, and it rarely meant anything good coming from a man. Financial desperation often attracted the worst kind of attention. Nathaniel saw the change in her posture and immediately clarified. "A job offer at Reed and Whitmore." Claire blinked. "Why would you offer me a job? You don't know me. You don't know what I can do." "I know enough," he said calmly. "I saw someone smart, grounded, and resilient. That's exactly the kind of person I need right now." She stared at him. "For what kind of job?" "My executive assistant. My current assistant is retiring next month. I've been interviewing replacements, but no one has felt right." Claire almost laughed. "I have no experience for something like that." "You have exactly what I'm looking for," he said. "Character, work ethic, intelligence. Skills can be taught. Character can't." She shook her head. "This doesn't make sense. Why would you offer something like that to a complete stranger?" Nathaniel's expression softened. "Because someone once did it for my mother. She raised me alone after my father died. We were dirt poor, but someone gave her a chance, one opportunity that changed our lives." Claire searched his face, looking for a catch for a hint of condescension or manipulation, but there was only sincerity. Still, her guard stayed up. He continued, "The starting salary is $55,000 with full benefits, health insurance, child care assistance. I can send you the full description." Claire's breath caught. That was nearly 3 times what she made working both of her current jobs. Health insurance alone would be life-changing. Ella's last ear infection had cost over $200 in doctor fees and prescriptions. Claire had pawned her mother's necklace to pay for it. "Why me?" she whispered, still stunned. "There are so many people struggling in this city. Why offer this to me?" Nathaniel hesitated. For a moment, a shadow passed behind his eyes. "Sometimes life places people in your path for a reason," he said quietly. "Will you at least think about it?" Claire didn't answer right away. Her heart was racing. Her mind was buzzing with both hope and fear. Could this be real? Could this be safe? She looked toward the kitchen where Greta watched from behind the counter, then back at Nathaniel. He wasn't pressuring her. He wasn't making promises he couldn't keep. He had just opened a door. "I'll think about it," she said, voice steady now. "Good," he replied with a smile. "That's all I ask." As he turned to leave, Claire clutched the slip of paper he'd handed her, a printed description of the position. As she read the words, her hand shook slightly. This wasn't just a job. It might be a lifeline. 1 week later, Claire sat stiffly across from Nathaniel Reed in a glass-walled office that overlooked the skyline from the 32nd floor of the Reed and Whitmore Tower. The city below looked nothing like it did from the windows of her 3rd-floor apartment. Up here, everything felt untouchable, clean, and impossibly out of reach. Yet here she was. The interview had been going on for nearly an hour, and gradually Claire found herself relaxing. Nathaniel wasn't grilling her. He asked thoughtful questions, gave her room to explain, and treated her answers with respect. Even when she fumbled or admitted gaps, he listened, not judged. He glanced at the resume she had printed at the public library, its formatting plain, the content sparse. "I see a few employment gaps," he said. "Could you walk me through those?" "I had my daughter Ella," Claire said directly. "During those times I worked under-the-table jobs, cleaning houses, babysitting, whatever I could find that allowed me to keep her with me." He nodded. "Makes sense. And before that?" "A year as a dental office receptionist," she replied. "And 6 months doing data entry at an insurance firm. They downsized." Nathaniel closed the folder gently. "I won't lie to you. This role will stretch you. You'll need to pick things up quickly, but I believe you can do it." Claire leaned forward, her voice clear and steady. "I'm a fast learner. I've never had anything handed to me, so I don't take opportunities lightly. If you give me a shot, I'll earn it." He studied her for a moment longer, then said, "There's one more thing you should know." His expression turned more serious, and Claire braced herself. "This position requires complete discretion. You'll have access to sensitive information, business-related, yes, but also personal. I need someone I can trust, someone who doesn't talk to gossip columns or whisper in elevators." Claire nodded. "I understand. Confidentiality matters." "It's more than important," he said. "It's essential. The board doesn't know I'm hiring someone without traditional qualifications. Some will object. If you accept this role, you'll face scrutiny. They'll question why you're here, and they might even suggest improper reasons for your hiring." Her cheeks flushed. She hadn't thought about what people might assume. The rumors, the whispers. Nathaniel continued, his voice calm but direct. "The job itself is demanding. Long hours, high pressure, but the bigger challenge will be dealing with perceptions. I want to be upfront with you." Claire processed that. The salary, $55,000 a year, full benefits, health care, child care support, enough to pay rent on time, enough to buy groceries without counting coins, enough to stop fearing every unexpected expense. But it would also mean navigating office politics, subtle digs, and suspicious stares. She had done harder things, but never under such a spotlight. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked. Please don't give me the rehearsed answer. Just tell me the truth. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. Then he stood and walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, his hands in his pockets, looking out over the glittering cityscape. When I saw you at that drugstore, he began slowly, counting coins, holding your daughter, whispering to her like the world wasn't closing in. I saw my mother. She was strong, proud, determined, and she carried the same weight in her eyes. We were broke. My dad had died when I was 10. She took any job she could find, and even when it wasn't enough, she never let it show. He turned to face Claire. 20 years ago, someone took a chance on her. It changed our lives. I promised myself I'd do the same for someone else if I ever got the chance. She watched him, unsure what to say. But there's more, he added, his voice lower now. I've built a life filled with success and strategy, but lately I've looked around and realized I've built something that means nothing if I can't connect with another person on a human level. My days are filled with people who want favors, deals, or invitations to galas. Not a single one of them knows who I am. You? You didn't want anything. You didn't ask for help. You were surviving. He let out a short breath. I'm not explaining this well. You're lonely, Claire said quietly. Nathaniel blinked as if surprised by her bluntness. Then he smiled a little ruefully. Maybe I am. Claire leaned back, still trying to absorb it all. So this job offer, is it business or personal? It's a business decision with personal motivation, he said carefully. I need someone capable. You need an opportunity. That it might lead to a friendship or something more? That's a separate matter, entirely on its own terms. His tone was respectful, professional. Nothing in his behavior had ever been inappropriate. Claire drew a breath. I'll take the job. A flicker of relief crossed Nathaniel's face. But let me be clear, she added firmly. I'll earn my place here. No special treatment, no shortcuts. I'm grateful for your kindness, but what I do here, I want it to stand on merit. Nathaniel walked over and extended his hand. Welcome to Reed and Whitmore, Ms. Dawson, as she shook his hand. Claire knew her life had just changed forever. 3 months later, Claire's life barely resembled the one she had known. Her mornings no longer began with the sound of the faucet dripping in a drafty apartment or the anxiety of stretching dollars to cover diapers. Now she woke in a clean, sunlit 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of Maple Hollow, a quiet, working-class neighborhood where Ella had her own nursery with real toys, warm blankets, and a mobile that played lullabies. The job at Reed and Whitmore had transformed everything. Ella was enrolled in the company's on-site daycare, a place with soft carpets, certified caregivers, and developmental toys Claire could never have afforded before. Knowing her daughter was safe and cared for just floors below brought peace of mind Claire hadn't experienced in years. The health insurance alone had been life-saving. When Ella needed a minor surgical procedure for her ears, Claire didn't panic over how to pay. She scheduled the appointment, no pawn shop, no missed rent, no frantic bargaining with clinics, and professionally. Claire threw herself into the role like her future depended on it, because it did. She worked late, took online courses on office management, studied Nathaniel's emails, calendar, and systems until she could anticipate his needs before he even voiced them. Her organizational instincts, honed from years of juggling multiple jobs and motherhood, translated perfectly to executive assistance. She wasn't just learning, she was thriving. Nathaniel noticed. She's got a sixth sense, he told his board one afternoon after Claire managed to reschedule 3 investor calls, flag a double-booked meeting, and catch a typo in a merger agreement, all before noon. But not everyone was as impressed. Veronica Reed, Nathaniel's ex-wife and a longtime board member, had made her disapproval known from day one. Elegant, calculating, and cool as marble, Veronica never missed a chance to remind people that she had once helped build Reed and Whitmore beside Nathaniel, and that she didn't approve of his new charity project. She's got no pedigree, Veronica whispered at one company mixer. One bad quarter, and she'll fold like a diner receipt. At a fundraiser dinner, Veronica had spoken loud enough for several executives to hear. Nathaniel's always Had a soft spot for hopeless cases. It's admirable, really, until they end up on the payroll. Nathaniel publicly defended Claire at every turn, emphasizing her performance, her improvement, her absolute dedication, but the whispers persisted. Some employees questioned the real reason she had been hired. Others made assumptions Claire tried her best to ignore. Every day she arrived early and left late, knowing she had to prove herself twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. Then came the Richardson contract. It was the biggest deal Reed and Whitmore had pursued in years, one that would open global markets and introduce their technology to international hospitals. It was also Veronica's project. She had handled the client relationship personally, leveraging her old family connections to bring them to the table. The night before the presentation, Claire stayed late to prepare the slides and review the numbers one last time. The office was empty, the only sound the hum of computers and the distant buzz of the city through the glass. As she scanned the financial forecasts, something didn't sit right. The projected returns seemed inflated. The market analysis claimed expansion rates that felt too optimistic. She double-checked the estimates, then compared them to last quarter's internal research reports. Her stomach turned. The numbers had been tampered with. This wasn't optimism. This was fiction. She reached for her phone and called Nathaniel directly. "Hi, sorry to call so late," she said, "but I think there's a serious problem." His voice was instantly alert. "What is it?" "It's the Richardson proposal. The numbers are wrong. I mean, they're manipulated. If you present these tomorrow, you'll be promising things the company can't possibly deliver." There was a pause. "How sure are you?" he asked. 100%, Claire replied. "I've cross-checked everything." "Bring everything to my place," he said. "Tonight." An hour later, they sat at Nathaniel's dining table, pages of data spread out between them. Claire walked him through every discrepancy, every suspicious figure. Nathaniel's expression grew darker by the minute. "These aren't mistakes," he said quietly. "They're intentional." "Who prepared the report?" Claire asked. "Veronica did. She insisted on handling it herself." Claire sat back. The implications were staggering. Fraud, sabotage, and why? Nathaniel closed the folder, rubbing his temples. "If I had presented these projections and the deal went through, we would have been legally obligated to deliver results we couldn't reach. We'd face lawsuits, bankruptcy. You may have just saved this company." Claire didn't feel proud. She felt cold, because tomorrow she would have to speak up. She would have to face Veronica and the board, and she knew this wasn't just about numbers anymore. This was personal. The following morning, Claire arrived at Reed and Whitmore earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet risen, and the building was cloaked in a quiet hush, but her thoughts were anything but still. The Richardson presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. Nathaniel had called an emergency meeting for 8 a.m. with the executive team to review the manipulated data Claire had uncovered. He'd insisted she attend. As she stepped into the company's daycare to drop off Ella, the warm smiles from the staff and the sight of her daughter giggling with a toy cow offered a flicker of calm. Whatever happened today, Claire reminded herself, this, Ella, was her reason, her strength. She straightened her blazer, clutched her folder of documents, and walked toward the executive conference room. Through the glass doors, she could already see the room filling: department heads, legal counsel, financial officers, and Veronica Reed, seated at the head of the polished mahogany table with a look that could cut glass. Nathaniel stood near the monitor, his demeanor composed but unmistakably firm. At 8 March sharp, he addressed the room. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. Last night we uncovered serious inconsistencies in the Richardson proposal. These discrepancies have significant legal and financial implications." Veronica arched a manicured eyebrow. "Inconsistencies? I personally oversaw that proposal." "Yes," Nathaniel said evenly. "You did." He nodded toward Claire, who stepped forward and began distributing the folders she'd prepared. "Ms. Dawson caught the discrepancies during her final review," he continued. "She's highlighted all the altered data, projected earnings, market penetration claims. None of it adds up." The executives opened the folders. A low murmur rippled through the room as eyes scanned the figures. Veronica's expression stayed controlled. but Claire noticed her grip tightening around a silver pen. "These are serious accusations," Veronica said coolly, "and they're coming from an assistant with no formal background in finance." Claire didn't flinch. "The numbers speak for themselves," she said calmly. "The revenue forecasts contradict our internal research. The projections are inflated nearly double compared to industry benchmarks. We can't fulfill the promises written here." Thomas Grant, the CFO, looked up. "She's right. These figures are unrealistic, even dangerous." He turned toward Veronica. "Who actually ran these numbers?" Veronica leaned back, her voice sharp but composed. "Marcus Henderson from Analytics. He followed my direction. We aim to present an aggressive forecast to secure buy-in from the Richardson board." "This goes far beyond aggressive," Nathaniel said, stepping forward. "This borders on fraud." The room tensed. "Why?" Claire asked. "Why alter the projections?" Veronica's mask cracked, just slightly. Her voice lowered, laced with fury. "I've worked for this company for 20 years. Built relationships, closed deals, held this place together through 3 mergers. And then you show up with your second-hand suit and your sob story, and suddenly you have Nathaniel's ear. It's insulting." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Veronica, no," she snapped. "You want the truth? Fine. I brought Richardson in. It was my deal. I wasn't going to let your charity case ruin it." Claire's stomach turned. "I pushed the numbers," Veronica admitted. "We could have corrected them later. The point was to lock them in while we had leverage." "That's not how this company operates," Nathaniel said, voice dangerously quiet. "That's not how I operate." "Oh, please," Veronica scoffed. "You've changed. Since she arrived, you've gone soft." The Nathaniel I knew understood that business means risks. "Fraud isn't a risk, it's a crime," Thomas interrupted. Veronica stood, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "You're all blind. How do you think the Richardson board will react when they find out your assistant, not an executive, not even an analyst, undermined their lead contact? How will the shareholders react when they learn you're letting your personal feelings dictate major decisions?" "That's enough," Nathaniel said. Veronica's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this, both of you." Nathaniel straightened. "As of now, you're suspended pending investigation. Security will collect your devices. Please leave." "You can't." "I can. I have the authority." Veronica's face turned red, but she didn't argue. She turned sharply, gathered her things, and walked out without another word. Silence settled over the room. The executives stared at Claire, some with curiosity, some with open surprise, some reevaluating her entirely. Nathaniel finally broke the silence. "The Richardson presentation is in less than 2 hours. Thomas, work with Claire to update the projections. The rest of you, start preparing a damage control strategy." He turned to Claire as the others filed out. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. "She's not going to let this go, is she?" "No," Nathaniel said. "But neither will we." The next 3 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Veronica didn't go quietly. She launched a quiet but relentless campaign to discredit both Nathaniel and Claire. Articles started appearing in obscure business blogs, veiled insinuations that Reed and Whitmore's leadership had become unstable, that the CEO was prioritizing emotional attachments over executive judgment. Anonymous sources began whispering about favoritism, calling Claire a personal appointment rather than a professional one. Nathaniel called an emergency board meeting to disclose everything. He presented the manipulated projections, the evidence of Veronica's actions, and Claire's role in preventing a potential catastrophe. Legal counsel backed him, the CFO supported him, but the board was divided. Veronica still had allies. Old money, old loyalties. Behind the scenes, she worked the phones, spinning the narrative in her favor. She claimed Claire had overstepped, that Nathaniel had undermined protocol. A few shareholders expressed concern. The Richardson deal, meanwhile, hung in limbo. The partners were now wary of internal conflict. Claire stayed focused. She kept her head down and her work flawless. She double-checked everything, answered emails late into the night, rescheduled meetings without error. When questioned, she responded professionally, never defensive. Her poise under mounting pressure didn't go unnoticed. Nathaniel never distanced himself. If anything, he grew more open in his support. During staff briefings, he publicly credited Claire for her judgment and accuracy. During executive sessions, he made it clear she spoke with his full trust. Still, the pressure was real. Claire often found herself alone in the elevator, aware that conversations stopped when she entered a room. She ate lunch at her desk to avoid hushed glances in the break room. She could feel the weight of every assumption, every sideways look, but she kept going. Then came the rescheduled Richardson presentation. It was Claire's final chance to show the board, and everyone else, that she wasn't a fluke. That morning, as she reviewed the last round of figures, her phone rang. It was the daycare. "Ms. Dawson, Ella has a fever of 103. The caregiver said gently. "We think it might be another ear infection. She needs to be picked up." Claire's throat tightened. The presentation started in 30 minutes. Nathaniel was counting on her, but Ella, her daughter, was sick. She had no choice. She burst into Nathaniel's office flustered. He was rehearsing his opening pitch. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "Ella's sick, high fever. I have to take her to the doctor." Nathaniel didn't hesitate. "Go. Family comes first, always." Claire blinked. "But the presentation, I'll handle it," he assured her. "You've already done the hard part. I've got this." She nodded, grabbed her bag, and rushed to the daycare. Within an hour, she and Ella were in the pediatric ward. The diagnosis came quickly. Another ear infection, worse than the last. The doctor recommended overnight observation to manage her fever. Claire stayed by her daughter's side, holding her small hand through IVs and fussing nurses. She hadn't even checked her phone until almost midnight. One message. From Nathaniel Richardson. Signed, full terms, honest numbers. "How's Ella?" Claire smiled. Despite the exhaustion, the chaos, and the stress of the day, a calm settled in her chest. She texted back a quick update. Ella was stable, sleeping. As she sat in the stiff hospital chair, watching the slow rise and fall of her daughter's chest, she reflected on how much had changed. 3 months ago, she was counting coins in a drugstore, afraid to ask for help. Tonight, she had helped save a corporation from disaster, and her child was being cared for in a hospital room she could actually afford. Then came the soft knock at the door. Claire looked up. Nathaniel stepped inside, tie loosened, holding a to-go coffee and a teddy bear with a satin ribbon around its neck. "I figured you could use this," he said, offering the cup. "The bear's for Ella when she wakes up." Claire stared at him, touched. "You didn't have to come." "I wanted to," he replied, pulling up a chair beside her. "You and Ella, you're important to me." Claire looked down, emotions she had been holding at bay, pushing forward all at once. "I don't even know what to say." "Say nothing," he said. "Just rest." They sat in silence, the sounds of distant monitors beeping and Ella breathing steadily between them. For the first time, the space between them didn't feel like CEO and assistant. It felt like something more, something real. The following morning, Claire awoke in the hospital chair to the warmth of sunlight streaking through the blinds and the faint sound of Ella stirring. Her daughter's fever had broken during the night, and now she lay smiling, clutching the teddy bear Nathaniel had brought. Claire stretched her sore limbs and looked around the room. The second chair where Nathaniel had been was now empty. A note sat folded on the small table beside the coffee cup. "Went to grab breakfast. You look too peaceful to wake." And Claire ran her thumb over the neat handwriting, a small smile forming on her lips. It was strange how quickly someone could become part of your world. How kindness, when consistent and genuine, could rebuild trust she didn't even realize she'd lost. Later that afternoon, back at Reed and Whitmore, the aftershocks of the Richardson deal's success were still being felt. The board, which had once questioned Nathaniel's judgment, was now praising his integrity for presenting honest projections, even when it risked losing the contract. What impressed them most was how the company came through unscathed, despite the internal sabotage, and Claire, once seen as the outsider, was suddenly viewed differently. She held it together better than most senior managers would have. Thomas Grant remarked during a post-presentation debrief, "We're lucky to have her." But not everyone had changed their tune. Veronica Reed had gone quiet after her suspension, but Claire knew silence didn't mean surrender. The woman had too much pride, too many connections, to vanish without a fight. Rumors of lawyers and private investigators floated through office chatter, but Claire focused on her work. She wasn't here to play politics. She was here to prove her worth. Nathaniel continued to include her in key meetings, not just as his assistant, but increasingly as a trusted advisor. He asked for her opinions, listened, sometimes stayed late, just to talk about strategy and sometimes just to talk. They shared coffee, then lunches, then late evenings reviewing contracts, laughing about childhood stories, or debating which movies Ella might like when she was old enough to sit through one. One evening, as Claire was packing up to leave, Nathaniel stopped her outside the elevator. "I need to tell you something," he said. She paused. "Everything okay?" He nodded, but his tone was different. Veronica submitted her resignation. Claire's eyes widened. "What? I thought she'd fight it to the bitter end." "So did I," Nathaniel said. "But I think, after everything," she realized the board was behind us. She lost that war before she ever truly started it. Claire took a slow breath. "So, it's really over?" Nathaniel smiled gently. "One chapter is." They stepped into the elevator, the doors closing behind them with a soft whoosh. For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of descent was the only sound between them. Then Claire looked up. "Why did you come to the hospital last night?" she asked. Her voice was quiet but clear. He met her gaze. "Because I couldn't sleep. Because I wanted to be sure you were okay. Because you and Ella matter more than I expected." Claire didn't look away. "And what does that mean?" she asked. Nathaniel reached for her hand, tentatively, respectfully. Their fingers touched, and he didn't let go. "It means that when I helped you at the pharmacy, I thought I was doing something small," he said. "But you, your courage, your strength, you changed something in me." The elevator chimed, doors opening to the ground floor. Claire squeezed his hand gently. "You changed." "Mine too." They didn't label what was forming between them. It wasn't a romance born from fantasy or rescue. It was something slower, rooted in respect, shared experiences, and long hours earned through effort. That weekend, Claire and Ella joined Nathaniel at a quiet park just outside the city. Ella toddled through the grass in her tiny shoes, her giggles echoing as she chased a butterfly. Claire sat beside Nathaniel on a bench, her hair loose, her laugh real. "She looks happy," he said, watching Ella roll in the clover. Claire nodded. "She is." She glanced at him, and for the first time in a long while, "So am I." Nathaniel looked at her, eyes warm. "Then let's keep building on that." As the sun dipped lower and the golden light spilled across the sky, they sat there in companionable silence, two lives that had collided by chance now quietly beginning something new, not out of need, but out of choice. The following Monday began with sunlight and calm, but by noon, Claire could feel something shifting. Whispers were circulating again. A memo had been leaked. An internal summary of Claire's original hiring had somehow made its way to a niche finance blog. Though the contents weren't scandalous, just a brief mention of her being an unconventional hire based on direct CEO discretion, it was enough to spark online speculation. The timing wasn't random. Veronica might have stepped down, but she hadn't disappeared. That afternoon, a journalist called the office, asking pointed questions about Nathaniel's relationship with his assistant. Claire's stomach sank. She hadn't done anything wrong, but she also knew perception could be weaponized, especially against women like her who didn't come from power. Nathaniel called her into his office. "You've seen the article?" he asked. She nodded. "I have." He leaned forward, eyes searching hers. You didn't do anything wrong, Claire. I know, she replied. But that doesn't always matter. He was quiet for a moment. I can issue a statement. Shut this down. She shook her head. Don't. That'll make it worse. If you act like there's something to defend, people will just dig deeper. Nathaniel looked frustrated. At the press, at the rumors, at the way Claire had to be the one protecting them from slander she didn't cause. You shouldn't have to keep proving you belong here, he said finally. Claire folded her hands in her lap. But I do, and I'm not going anywhere. Her words steadied him. I've drafted a letter to the board, he said, outlining your role in saving the Richardson deal, documenting your performance, transparent, fact-based. I want to make sure no one inside this company questions your credibility again. Claire blinked, caught off guard by his quiet determination. Thank you, she said. Later that day, Nathaniel sent the memo to the full board. It included charts of Claire's workflow optimization, details of her contributions to recent contracts, and a breakdown of projected growth due to her departmental reorganizations. The board didn't just acknowledge it, they responded with unanimous support. Still, the stress took a toll. Claire tried to keep up with everything, emails, calls, document reviews, but at night, she found herself lying awake, listening to Ella breathe beside her, wondering if things would ever truly calm down. One evening, as she was working late, alone in the office, Nathaniel appeared with 2 cups of tea. Chamomile, he said. You've had too much coffee today. She smiled, surprised. He sat on the edge of her desk. I know it's been a rough week. You've held up stronger than I think even you realize. Claire took the tea. It's not about being strong, she said. It's about being necessary. Nathaniel watched her carefully. You don't have to do this alone, Claire. She met his gaze. Neither do you. For a long moment, they just sat in silence. No titles, no pressure. Just 2 people who had walked through storms and somehow ended up here, on the same side. Then Claire said softly, I was thinking about something today. Yeah? About that day at the pharmacy, she murmured. You changed everything, not just by helping me, but by believing I had something more to offer. Most people in your position would have walked away. Nathaniel shook his head. Most people wouldn't have seen what I saw. But you were unforgettable. Not because you were struggling, because you stood tall anyway. Claire smiled, her eyes shining. Maybe we saved each other. He nodded once. Maybe we did. And for the first time in weeks, the noise outside, the whispers, the speculation, the old wounds, faded into something far away. What remained? Between them was quiet, unshakable trust, and something deeper they hadn't quite named yet. 2 weeks later, Claire stood outside the Reed and Whitmore building, holding Ella's hand. The morning sun cast a soft glow across the city as people rushed by, oblivious to the quiet moment between mother and daughter. Claire wasn't rushing anymore. Inside, the company was preparing for the quarterly leadership presentation. This time, Claire wasn't just in the room, she was helping lead it. She'd earned every piece of trust that came her way, and now, even the most skeptical executives deferred to her calm, precise coordination. Ella tugged at her hand. Up, she whispered. Claire smiled and lifted her daughter onto her hip. Big day? Asked a familiar voice from behind her. Nathaniel approached in a crisp gray suit, but the formality didn't reach his eyes. They were warm, rested, focused, just like hers. You could say that, Claire said, adjusting Ella's position on her hip. Though I think she's the real boss around here. Ella babbled something in agreement and grabbed Nathaniel's tie playfully. She has excellent taste, he said, laughing as he let her tug on it. Then he looked at Claire more seriously. The board unanimously approved the proposal you drafted for the mentorship initiative. We're launching it next quarter. Claire blinked. Seriously? You're heading it, he said. You'll be helping hire and mentor women from non-traditional backgrounds, single mothers, veterans, career switchers, just like you. Claire felt emotion rise in her throat. That's Exactly what I would have needed 2 years ago. That's why you're perfect for it. Nathaniel looked down at Ella. She's going to grow up in a world her mother helped build. Claire pressed her lips together, swallowing the moment. Then she looked back at him. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you ever think about how different things could have been if we hadn't been in that pharmacy that day? Nathaniel tilted his head. I think about it all the time, not just what I could have missed, but what I wouldn't have become. He stepped closer now, his voice lower. I thought I had everything. Then I realized I had nothing that truly mattered until I met you and Ella. Claire held his gaze. And now? She asked. Now I have purpose, he said, and people. And something that feels a lot like a future. She leaned into him slightly, letting her forehead rest against his chest for just a moment. When she looked up, she said, So what do we call this? Nathaniel smiled. A partnership. A family. A second chance. He offered his hand, not in formality, but in commitment. Claire took it. As they walked inside together, Claire carrying Ella and Nathaniel carrying her laptop, they weren't just walking into a meeting or a boardroom. They were walking into the life they had chosen, built not from wealth or power or pity, but from resilience, faith, and a moment of unexpected connection in the most ordinary of places. And sometimes that's where the most extraordinary stories begin.